right. On today's show, welcome on a very special guest. He is Mike Slonina. He is the CEO and founder for a shot for life. Mike, how are you today?
I'm good, Jeff. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, no problem. Did I get the last name? But thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. Love what you're doing, in Massachusetts, and soon what you're gonna bring into Rhode Island. We'll definitely get into that. But first of all, Mike, I always ask all my guests all these questions before I start. Is how are you doing during these crazy COVID times?
I'm doing good. It is a crazy COVID time. This whole last 12 months, almost to the day, actually, has been crazy. It's kind of been one curveball after the other, but everybody's healthy and looking very much forward to a life without COVID.
Yes, yeah, it's going to be really nice. I mean, I just heard too that like Duke, they can't even continue their season because it's one of the guys got COVID from the tournament.
Terrible timing.
I know it's awful, but it's crazy. But Mike, I want to ask you. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit of background of how a Shot for Life got started and where it came from and how did it get going.
Sure. So the real story of A Shot for Life starts in 2010. My mom was diagnosed with what was thought to be a malignant brain tumor. Before I go any further, it wasn't, and she is okay. And I know that, so sometimes I forget to tell the other people that, and then they are wondering what happened. So it is a happy story, but my family is one of an incredibly exponentially small percentage of people that have the outcome that we've had. And A Shot for Life exists for all the families that don't have, an amazing stroke of saving grace luck at the 11th hour. Basketball has always been a really big part of my identity and a big part of my life, and shooting is something that I always took really seriously. And when she was diagnosed, a diagnosis like that makes you feel so powerless, and you want to feel like you have some semblance of control in a situation where you realistically had none. And I just wanted to do something to make a difference. So I came up with a kind of a crazy idea that my mom actually hated at first. And I started training 3 times a day because I wanted to become the first person in basketball history to shoot for 24 hours straight from all over the floor. I had to see a nutritionist. I had to see conditioning people. She intentionally put up a million barriers to try to talk me out of doing it, but I was convinced. I did. On April 9th, 2011, I did become the first person to accomplish that. I shot 73.2% in 24 hours. And when it happened, it was just going to be a one-time thing. And then I wanted to be a sports psychologist and work with athletes. A local ESPN reporter named Brendan Hall and a local Yahoo reporter picked up the story at the time. And then their national brand just picked it up. And all of a sudden, people are reaching out from all over the world saying what sports and cancer meant to them, what me and my mom's story meant to them. And at that point, it was like, all right, this is what I want to do. How do we make this a much bigger thing to impact a lot more people? Do you want me to go into the sequence of events from there?
Yeah, if you would like to. I just want to ask a question too. What's it like shooting for 24 hours? How did you push through that, first of all, and everything?
Yeah, I am kind of crazy competitive. This was an obsession for me. There was so many things that were driving me with that experience, and I'm just really competitive. I trained for a really long time. It sounds like hyperbole, but I swear to you, it's not. Whatever it took to do those 24 hours is what it took. The truth is that I needed it on a personal level. I realized when people were reaching out how much it would mean to so many other people, and I didn't know what the future of what A Shot for Life would look like. It wasn't even an organization at the time. It was just an event. But I knew that if this could go well, this is the type of thing that could lay the foundation to build a skyscraper. And that was what I wanted to do. And nothing was going to stop me from doing that.
That's great. And how did the guys from ESPN and Yahoo end up finding out about the story? How did they pick up? Did you publicize it, or how did it come about? Because I also read that you're a Guinness World Record holder for shooting the 24 hours as well.
So get us and Guinness are in a conversation. There are other world record databases that accept it. Their problem with it is that we don't have an exact count of how many shots I took from each spot. We have strong estimates. We have tens of hours of video, but I don't know exactly how many threes to the number. So that's an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful as A Shot for Life continues to get bigger, we can revisit that.
And they listen every day, so we're gonna try to get.
We do know no one else has ever done it before. That is without question.
I never. That's great.
But for Brendan, who was at ESPN at the time, I actually don't remember how it reached him, but he took an interest in the story and he gave it a platform right away. And there are so many people along the way for a journey like A Shot for Life that are indispensable to what it's going to become. And Brendan is one of those people that got behind this right away.
Nice. And then what was like the process for you to go forward with this to actually, make an organization? Like, how did you chase this? Because you're what, 17, 18 years old kid trying to
Yeah.
start your own organization. Like when you walk into like lawyer's office, do they like laugh at you? Like, what do they say to you when you come in?
That is exactly what happened, actually. So when the first event happened, we donated every dime to cancer research, which is in your head at the time the noble thing to do. The problem is now you have no other money to run any other events.
Yeah.
And so we are starting at zero. And I would go into lawyers' offices. I would explain what my vision was. I was 19 years old. Probably, now looking at it as a 28-year-old, I probably sounded very incoherent at the time, but I definitely had passion. I've always had that. And I can't even tell you how many kicked me out or politely said, oh yeah, we'll get back to you. We'll circle back. And you never hear back. I remember there was one lawyer actually in the seaport of Boston. I don't remember his name, but he told me that I should call the American Cancer Society and pray to God that they work with us. And for someone like me, I love that. Honestly, like my reaction was, I love that. And, stuff like that drives you. And so we did get a lawyer to work with us and establish the organization. And so there's a lot of steps you have to go. You have to get the 501c3 license. You have to get a solicitation license. That takes years to get. And so it did take some time to get that sort of back end stuff together.
That's interesting. Yeah, the 501c, I'm sure, is a process, all that stuff, but that's great that you had a lawyer to work for you. And I'm sure that Seaport lawyer definitely motivated you more to kind of get to where you wanted to be.
He did. I'm very thankful for him.
Yeah, whoever you are. But
that's right.
And how, like, do you go to college and like how do you stay motivated through this to keep this going as if you're in college and you're trying to work through this?
So that's a good question. And when I was in college, truly, I wasn't sure I wanted to do this full time yet. I think, when you're in college, you have this sort of fantasy idea of what your adult life is going to be like, that you're going to have so much free time. And, oh yeah, I can run 2 businesses. That's not a problem at all. And I learned that was not going to be as simple as I thought. And we were doing little events in college. Really, we were just keeping the brand growing. That, I did not have enough time to dedicate to it to raise the sums of money that we're raising now. And that I think we're on the direct path to raising more. But I needed the brand to continue to grow. And so the first step in that process is actually the event that's moving to Rhode Island now. It's called the A Shot for Life Challenge. It is the only talent-based charity basketball program in the world. There's nothing else like it. Came up with the idea in my Quinnipiac dorm room as a sophomore in college. And I said, we're going to take the best shooters in Massachusetts, do a big competition, name the winner the best shooter in the state. We did only a boys division the first year, just as a proof of concept. Later, a girls division would become a part of it the next year. And now it's become a really popular thing. So really, we used the momentum that we still had from my first event to make that happen. And now we're at a stage 7-8 years in where our players are following in each other's footsteps. So it was just an idea that came to me in my dorm room, but it's been a staple of what we do ever since.
That's awesome. That's great. And that's such a great idea to, you build that and make it happen and make that staple. Like, and what was that like process of like getting other players interested and keep people coming back to where the point you are now, where it's just like you mentioned the event and people are there. So like, what was it like to get the people to keep coming and showing up?
I think we were really lucky that we got so much press with the first event. It really was still so recent at the time that it was a pretty easy sell. And we're really fortunate that our first couple classes took the responsibility of being an ASFL player seriously, truthfully. Like they set the tone that this is a roster. So if you're picked as an underclassman, you're back the following year. And that sends the message to the freshman that looks up to them, to the 7th grader that looks up to the freshman. And it's just a domino effect from there. And I don't want to leave out any names, but there are so many players that were 2 or 3 year players that were sort of top level talents. When players are going through the recruiting process, sometimes the Shot for Life can give a little bit of a bump because scouts will see your name in association with other players that are on their list. But these players that I'm thinking of in my head had already committed to their dream school, and they still came back year after year. And that loyalty is something that I will always appreciate. And I hope they feel like we've given that back.
That's awesome. That's great. That's really great. And now, is it just high school? Is it just college? Like, what is it? Like, who else can like participate, and what kind of players are you trying to get in as well?
So the ASFL Challenge is a talent-based program. So you first and foremost are scouted, and so you have to qualify on the floor, and then you go through an interview process. And the interview is much more of a conversation than an interview. In my experience, there are 2 types of 17-year-olds. There's the 17-year-old that's becoming a young adult, and then there's the 17-year-old that is maybe a little bit less prepared for an opportunity like this. And that's not a bad thing. These are teenagers. And so that's totally understandable. But we try to weed that out a little bit and make sure that the people that are representing our organization understand they're representing a charity. So there is a personal responsibility that comes along with that. We check their social media to make sure that, you know, the things they're putting out publicly will reflect positively on our organization. So for the A Shot for Life Challenge, that's a talent-based event, but we do have the ASFL Gauntlet, which is open to all ages and skill levels. It raised over $100,000 last year, had 190 registrants. With the COVID attrition, we ended up at around 115, and we had to totally change the event. And that one does actually have good players in it as well. We had 3 ESPN Top 100 kids in it last year, but you also have people in that have never played organized basketball in their life. And what I love about the Gauntlet is that it's such a community feel. Like you'll have on one court, you know, a player throwing down a windmill, and on the other court, a kid missing his 10th free throw in a row, but they're all having fun. And I think that's a really cool thing that we're able to offer.
Yeah, that's like such a cool prospect of like how you have the talent-based one, and then you just have the open forum one, and that's really cool. That like, you know, I think it's just cool to get people out there to play for a good cause, and makes people happy to be out there. And then my other question is too, like, how do you scout? Like, who's a scout? Do you scout? Do you have like guys that scout players that make sure they're part of the talent base as well too, or?
Yep. So we definitely have coaches that we consult in Massachusetts. I also am here in Massachusetts, so I'm able to see a bunch of these players and am familiar with them. I'm actually glad you asked that, because there's a couple guidelines that I want to talk about with the selection process.
Yeah.
Number one is we don't take freshmen ever. So even if that freshman was the number 1 ranked player in the country, we will not take them. The reason why is because it is a rollover roster where it's their spot every year. And for every underclassman we take, that's a senior that will never get picked. And it's a talent-based event. That's okay if that player truly does deserve it. But as a freshman, that's 4 years or 3 years of chewing up that roster spot. So we prefer not to do that. We always give preference to age. So if there's a junior and a senior that are about equal in our evaluation, even if the junior is a little better, we'll always take the senior, knowing that the junior can be picked the following year. It is a little subjective, truthfully. You know, people have said before, well, why don't you just do it by however many threes you make or what your percentage is? And the problem is that the players we're looking at are playing vastly different talent levels and competition levels. And so, you know, if a player is at a NEPSAC AAA school and is scoring 15 points a game, that's incredibly impressive. And you know, that may look a little different than a player that might be putting up much more gaudy numbers, but you know, the competition level is different. So it's hard. It is hard to select for this. Not picking players is probably the worst part of my job. But I feel confident in the rosters that we've put forward in throughout the years.
That's awesome. That's great. I think it's a good process of how you do it, and it sounds like a great process. And anyone that's listening out there is interested and want to be a part of it, you know, pay attention to what Mike is saying, and I think it's a good.
And so especially the part about if a senior was picked over you, it's never personal. It's never personal to that kid, because look, these kids are really talented and they are having success at a young age, and I think they're often getting recruited. And so I think when they get passed over for it, the tendency is to let that competitive out of you, and it's what makes them good athletes. And so I get that, but it never is from a personal place. It's always just, we want to make sure we can get both of you in, and this is the way that we can do that.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Now, this is completely off topic. Maybe it's just something down the line. You thinking about ever putting like a TBT team together and putting them in there?
That's actually, so one of our interns brought that up last summer. I think we have the talent to do it. I don't know if we have the size to do it. So every once in a while, we'll take a big if they're dominant. Like if it's like the last spot, really good kid, you know, dominant player, but not necessarily a shooter. If it works out, we will take them. We don't have that many of them. Like we have Tommy O'Neill, who's at Harvard now. We had Tyler Gibson, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Massachusetts our first year. But other than that, I don't know, on the boys' side at least, how many bigs we've had. And so we would just have to go five out and try to Golden State Warriors people.
Yeah, there you go. Just shoot a ton of threes. That's the best way to go. It's
right. Right.
I thought about it. I was like, yeah, you know, I just thought about it when we were just talking about it. It's like, you know, it's not a bad idea to try to put together a team. I know there's some other, you know, teams out in the TBT that do like, you know, donate to charities and stuff like that.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought that would be interesting if you could maybe pull that off one year, do something like that. That'd be really cool.
I wouldn't rule it out. I would never rule anything out.
That's awesome. That's great. And now you guys just don't do basketball. How do you branch out to like different sports? Because you just started to do that as well too, right?
Yeah, so that's a conversation that we've had on the table for a long time. I think probably every 3 months or so, we'll talk about different ideas in an abstract way about, well, what would it look like if we did an alpine skiing event? And we'll never do that probably, but it's just an example of something that would come up, and we'll talk about it for 5 minutes. So we have talked about other sports, and when COVID hit, we were facing the very real possibility of no basketball events at all when it was about this time last year or April last year. So we had to pivot to something that we knew could work in the coronavirus climate. We knew a home run derby would be spaced enough to work. What we were really happy to see is that when we announced it, there was so much interest right away. And we did not expect that. We thought we were going to have to build the brand of baseball, and it was immediate. And that gave us the inkling that maybe our brand is a little bit more advanced than we had thought in markets that we hadn't necessarily targeted yet. And that has actually caused us to look at what other sports might make sense to add as we continue to progress.
That's awesome. Now, and for the home run derby, is there like a money ball in there as well too? Like you do, like they're doing.
Forget how we did the last minute. I think so. We did it by time, not by balls, because we wanted to give the kids, if they were nervous, time to sort of swing that out. Yeah. So there were 4-minute rounds, long rounds. It was a lot of fun though. And for me, I've been around basketball my whole life. Our shot for life players are really good. So when a guy throws down a crazy dunk, it doesn't impress you that much because you've seen it so much. I'm not a baseball guy. So Josh Baez is hitting home runs 100 miles over the fence. And it's like the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. I was more of a fan. Oh yeah, it was awesome. And, it's easier. It was easier to appreciate their talent on some level because it was so different than anything I'd ever seen before up close.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm right there with you. I'm a basketball guy too, so I'm like, oh, like that's great that the guy dunked it, but I think if someone like hit like a home run like 300, 400 yards, it'd be like, oh, that was like the most impressive thing I think I've seen in a while.
So we had a softball division as well, and Destiny McGrath was one of our hitters. She hit 101 home runs in 16 minutes. It was the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. It was every pitch went out. It was unbelievable. If I wasn't there, I wouldn't have believed it. It was unbelievable.
Now, is that a world record itself too?
Gotta be. We should honestly maybe Guinness will accept this one. We should call him and
yeah.
We have video of this one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's really cool that you're branching out into different sports and just not basketball. I think that's absolutely amazing. But you also do too, like a fire and a police department, like right? They do go against each other, and what's that like as well?
So that event's awesome. That was the first step out of the high school fundraiser thing. News publications kept talking about a shot play as a high school fundraiser. And it was like nails on a chalkboard to me because that was never the trajectory that I saw. And I feel like once people view you in a certain pocket, it's really hard to get out of it. And so we had to do that. And the Battle of the Badges was the way that we did that. Bruce Higgins and I coached together at Catholic Memorial, and he's a detective in Boston and one of the best people I know. And he helped with Dave Blandino, who also went to my high school, and Scott Malone, who is a chief for the fire department, whose son went to CM with me. We all kind of helped put together the first Battle of the Badges, and it's gotten popular from the first year. The Boston skyline lit up for the event, so the TD Garden, the Zachem Bridge, the Prudential Building, all light up in red and blue on the day of the event. But the coolest part of the event is the motorcade that we do for a child with cancer. So it was canceled last year due to COVID, but in 2019, Saul Polanco showed up. And so we do research on the patient, and he loves Spider-Man and the Black Panther. So we had 2 people dressed up as Spider-Man and the Black Panther greeting him outside of the fire truck that dropped him off. And it's my favorite Shot for Life picture ever. The look on his face is just, it's why we work 10-hour days. It was just the coolest thing I've ever been a part of. And he scores in a packed house. Everybody goes crazy. He gets an MVP trophy at the end of the event. It's just a really good community event in Boston. And I'm looking forward to bringing that back, hopefully by May, but if not by June of this year.
That's awesome. And then, you mentioned COVID, like how did COVID affect you guys in 2020 and how did it affect your events? And how did you be able to still get your events in with dealing with COVID as well too?
So I think with an organization like ours, by the time we announce an initiative, it's at least 6 to 18 months in production. We were 18 months into development of a mammoth scale event that we had tabled, like the home run derby. We've talked about that before. That was tabled for an event that was coming in June of 2020. It started in fall of 2018, and we had to slam the brakes on it. Absolutely heartbreaking. We had to adjust everything. I mean, we had to totally reinvent the wheel. We had to change every event, completely rebuild how we did them. Credit to all of the players in our community for rolling with us on that, and not, so we do an orientation meeting for the basketball program, and they had to start fundraising. And so we were still on lockdown. So me, my staff, and all of our players met in an undisclosed location in Massachusetts at a random park. We had players driving from all over. We spaced them out. No one knew we were doing it. And it was a cool moment for our organization, actually, that we all kind of worked together with that. But to answer your question, it changed everything. It was extremely difficult to navigate. I'm thankful that we did. I'm thankful for all the people that came together to help sort of make all of that work, despite the challenges we were facing. And I'm very much looking forward to a year where we don't have to meet in the park randomly at 5 p.m.
Yeah, that'd be really nice. But it's crazy to show how much adversity and how much kids have adversity dealing with this COVID and being able to, still make events and make things happen. That's awesome for you guys as well too. And now, yeah, of course. And now I want to ask too, because you guys are expanding to Rhode Island. What's it like coming to another state and be able to expand into another state of Rhode Island, like in Rhode Island? And what are you looking forward to doing here?
I'm looking forward to building a Shot for Life's infrastructure there. So I want to do the basketball event first. I do have plans to bring the baseball event and softball event as well. I had actually a conversation about that earlier this morning about when that could be and what that could look like. I want to see how it goes. I think it's going to be really great. I think that the players are going to love it, just like our Massachusetts players have loved it. I absolutely see a scenario where it goes throughout at least New England and maybe beyond, but we're going to see how Rhode Island goes first. But I'm very excited to get this thing started.
That's awesome. And why Rhode Island? Is it because it's close by, or is it just...
So that was part of it. It's close by, and so it's an easy place that if I do have to get out and see a player in Rhode Island, or if I do have to get there for a meeting, I can get there. And so that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that Bob Pipe, who is now the athletic director at St. George's, used to be the athletic director at Rivers, which is a prep school in Massachusetts. We always had a really great relationship while he was there, and so it was a very easy call to somebody I already knew. And he was extremely gracious and offered St. George's as the host, and so it just made sense on a variety of levels.
Yeah, beautiful location. St.
It is.
Beautiful location. Right on the water, so you can't go wrong with that.
It is.
That's all. That's real good. And now this is a totally question. Like, when are you looking forward to start? The events in Rhode Island, and how can players look to sign up if you're in Rhode Island?
So the date is August 14th. The selection process has begun. We are going to reach out to them, and so for this one, they will hear from me. Usually it's by a text directly, and we do that for two reasons. Number one, I want to make sure the player is responsible with their phone. And so, teenagers are iffy with correspondences. And so I want to make sure that the players that we take, God forbid there's a scheduling change like we had in Massachusetts last year, I need players that are going to see their phone and say, okay, yeah, I can handle it. I guess one reason actually, that's why we do it, is so that just to make sure the kid is able to talk back and forth.
That's awesome. That's great. And now I have a question for, like, outside of the Shot for Life and everything that you're doing. You coach basketball. You mentioned that. Do you still coach basketball?
Yes.
Or are you still part of that?
Yes. Yes.
What's it like coaching basketball, like, during this crazy time as well too?
It's it's interesting. So I coach freshman basketball, and so I kind of see both ends of the spectrum. We have the Shot for Life workouts, and Anthony Morales is throwing in off the backboard alley-oops and going to his full ride place in the fall. And then I'm teaching kids, the concept of a backdoor cut. So it's a very big difference with the two levels of player that I work with. But I kind of love that, to be honest with you. I mean, for me, the coaching is less intense. It's more just sharing the love of basketball with a bunch of kids. Like that's really the part that I've liked about it. It has been challenging, certainly balancing it with the Shot for Life, but it's something that I really love to do. And CM is a program I grew up in and is always going to mean a lot to me.
No, that's awesome, Mike. Mike, you're just a great guy, man. Everything that you're doing is so wonderful and so amazing. And, being able to, make money for charity and help out with a charity. What is the charity that you donate to? I'm not sure if we mentioned that in the beginning of the show.
So the Dr. Curry Research Lab is a recipient of our funds. He actually coincidentally played at Harvard in the early 90s.
Wow.
Total coincidence, like 100% not on purpose. But I think it's kind of cool that the basketball tag goes all the way through to the actual research, which is a pretty cool thing.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, you're doing amazing things, man. And I love it. I love the idea. It's awesome that it's basketball focused, and it's the first, basketball charity event, charity that's going on. So I love it, man. You're doing an excellent job of everything. It's so cool. And I'm glad that we were able to get in touch. I'm glad that you're coming to Rhode Island. Rhode Island is such a big basketball state. So I think you picked the right state, because we love our basketball here.
And can I also just say, I really appreciate you having me on. I understand that we're the new guy in Rhode Island. And so we want to involve as many people as possible that are, a part of the Rhode Island basketball community, eventually a part of the Rhode Island baseball and softball community. And, we want to make sure that we are as inclusive as we possibly can be.
Hey, whatever we can do for you, happy to have you back on. Happy to bring players on, whatever you need with the Rhody Runbacks here for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. Mike, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing, man. You just have a great heart and keep doing what you're doing. All right.
Thank you, man. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.